As the space we have to garden tends to get smaller, but our desire to grow food gets larger, where do you find a place to grow those vegetables that we love to eat? Well, anywhere you can, of course, but with a little planning, you can have a landscape that's not only attractive, but edible too, and it's called a foodscape. So in today's video, I'm going to show you some tips that you should consider when you plan out your foodscape garden. Now, when you're trying to grow food in your front yard, especially when you live in a subdivision, you might need to be a little more careful with your plant design. But I thought we would talk to my friend Peter Langham, who happens to be a landscape architect, and he has a great foodscape garden. So Peter, help us understand the things that we need to be considering when we add that foodscape garden in our front yard.
Well, I think the first thing you need to consider is making sure that what you plant looks so good all the time.
Yep.
That everybody's getting value out of it. They look at it, they don't even know what it is. What they want to know is does that yard look great?
Right. So whether it's edible or not makes no difference to them. They probably don't even know it's edible or not.
That's right.
But this does look great. So as you're making your plant choices and your design elements, what are you thinking about here?
Well, I'm thinking about the contrast and the color. I'm thinking about texture. I'm thinking about plant height. I'm thinking about placement of the plants.
Yep.
And where they go and why they go there.
Yep.
For example, I plant my taller, darker leaf plants like broccoli and cauliflower on the front. They get taller, they last longer. On the backside, then I'll put something that I harvest more often, with like my lettuces and kales and things like that.
But in these days, all of that looks good anyway as an ornamental as well as an edible.
It does.
So you could really you could interchange those too.
Absolutely.
But what you're saying is the fact that they're actively harvesting those lettuces where you're cutting away the foliage a lot,
right,
tends to change the size and the look and the shape.
That's right. That's right. And I'll even take a head of lettuce and I'll just pull it out and immediately replant something else.
So you're succession planting.
Very much so. Very much so.
So what about the bed design, like the width of the bed and
Yep.
access into the bed?
So there are a couple things that are really important to me with regard to my beds.
Okay.
Number one is that they're raised beds. And I raise all my beds are all built up.
Okay.
And then once they're raised, I make sure the width is 30 inches.
Now let's talk about raised first. When you say raised, you're just talking about raising the soil level, not necessarily a physical structure to raise it.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. And I use different types of materials to raise my beds.
Okay.
Sometimes I just do soil raised up. Sometimes I do a traditional box bed. Sometimes I use bricks. I have a wide variety, but I get that bed raised up. And then the next thing I do is I prep my soil and I dig down deep and loosen it up down deep, and then I add all the different things that I want to add to it to make it so that I know these plants will do great.
Right.
And then what I do is I shape the beds.
Okay.
So I have a curvilinear design in my front yard bed here, but if you'll notice there, everything is 30 inches wide with a few exceptions where I have to fill in the gaps. And so what I do in the 30-inch wide, I do the 30-inch wide because we can step over it, we can harvest it from either side, and it's easy to change. The wider areas I'll come in with cauliflower or cabbage or collards or something that has the big broad leaves and can fill out a big space.
Yep. So you're planting what looks good.
Yep.
You're planting what's appropriate for the space.
Yep.
You're planting what you like to eat, no doubt.
Absolutely.
Right. And then you're just taking best practices to make sure that it's going to survive once it's in place.
That's right.
Sounds pretty doable to me.
It's pretty fun.
Okay. Thanks, Peter.
Uh-huh.
There are a lot of great qualities of having a foodscape garden, but it doesn't have to be all about the food. In fact, you still can have great ornamentals in there too that attract pollinators, like this black and blue salvia right here. There are bees galore all over these plants. Plus, it's a great complement with this purple against the chartreuse and the reds. What a great combination. But back to what Peter was saying earlier, when he talked about as he harvests his edibles out of his bed, he always uses that opportunity to put something new in its place. So if you play your cards right and you do a little advanced planning, you've got that backup team ready to take the field. So that's what he's done here. He has these exact plants as small seedlings that are going to now fill the void. And this is also the perfect opportunity to improve and prep the soil because you've got that blank slate, so you might as well take advantage of it. And so that's what he does because he's always mounding up this area, and so this is the perfect time for that. So a good soil of choice is something with a lot of organic matter in it that's basically composted. So today that's what we're going to do with this Soil Cube product. It's composted soil, and we're going to add some of that. It's OMRI approved, and so we're going to use a relatively small bag, and we'll just mix that into the area while maintaining the overall shape. Nothing fancy here, but we're just adding just one more light layer. I'm being careful not to compress this soil any more than I have to, but I do have to support myself, but I don't want to just like put my weight all over this bed. So to the extent that I can have a light footprint there, that's a good thing. Now, there's no need to till this in. In fact, you don't even want to, because you don't want to disrupt the microbial life and the established soil patterns that are in here already. So you just leave it on top and top dress it. But one more thing that you can do to add a little more nutrient to this area, because we're talking about leafy crops and they love nitrogen, they're heavy feeders that way. So I like to use a slow release organically derived source of nitrogen. So I use a little bit of malorganite, and just a small handful over the top, just a top dressing, is all that you need. And then this will continue to feed these plants over the rest of the fall season in a very safe and effective way. So it's as simple as that, and that should be sufficient. Of course, you can always look on the packaging to know exactly how much to apply. And then it's a matter of adding your plants, and that's the fun part. Okay, so that's all the plants I have for this area, and that pretty much fills out this space. Now all I have left to do is get this watered in. You always want to settle the soil around the roots, and you do that with a good drink of water. But from here on out, after that initial watering, Peter is smart in how he does his irrigation, and that's with drip irrigation. He's just got a line running along the base of that row right there, and I'm sure there'll be another one that will come through here, and then that will provide all the water that's necessary for the rest of the season and beyond. Then we're just going to go ahead and put this mulch back in place. We could add some fresh mulch if we wanted to, but this is adequate. We'll put it back in place, and this garden is ready to go for another harvesting in a few weeks from now.